you can sell land before you own it. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is we had a 20-acre parcel that I thought was grossly undervalued because we thought we could sell 2 10 acres for the same price that the 20 acres was. It was right on a road. It was is what, and I see those going, so I just paid full price for it, and then I pushed it out for closing as long as we could. Mm-hmm. And so I pushed it out for a 90-day closing, and that gave me the time to immediately turn and have those 2 10 acres separated and then put both those on the market. And actually, when I closed on the 20, the 2 10s had already sold or were closing at the same time. So when I walked out of the closing without ever even really technically just owning it on paper briefly, a second, and walking out with a check, from the 2 10 acres that we sold, and never even really stepped foot on the 20 that we even owned.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
Ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
All right, we're live, and this is the land podcast leg. So we've been cranking out some Trail Cam Radio episodes, and we're sitting here on a farm that you purchased last year, right?
Yes. Yep.
And to me, it's the dream setup. I mean, this is what I think everyone dreams of, and it takes
we've been very fortunate.
Decades of work and focus. Yeah, maybe a couple good breaks along the way, but I find so many people, this is the end goal, this is where they want to be. But often the very first step towards this is the hardest piece, and it takes a long time to compound into something like where you're at today. Would you agree with that?
I would say so, for sure.
Yeah. So I guess for briefly kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your career development. Like I know you were an appraiser at one point. You mentioned this last podcast you worked at the bank. I don't know if that was through the appraisals or not. And then just kind of that career journey a little bit.
Well, I first started out in banking in 1990, and I worked there for 8.5 years, and at the end, at a branch, I was branch manager of different branches. I met the local real estate appraisal. I was ordering appraisals and completing mortgages and installment loans, and did investments at bank. And he asked me if I wanted to come work with him, so I did. And it was pretty interesting because it taught me a lot about buying and selling, and creative ways to buy and sell. And so that was pretty cool in itself. I was an appraiser for a while from 99 to 2010, and I started my Whitetail business in 2005. I probably should have gone full time with that in 2008, but I waited till 2010. It was just big a leap of faith. So I was self-employed, so I could actually really begin and found the Whitetail business while I had a good career. That career was going down because of the housing market in the mid 2000s. In fact, in the UP of Michigan, it got hit really hard. Where land values really were cut. Nothing was selling. It didn't matter if it was a house, cabin on a lake, or hunting land. That's one of the reasons I probably should have gone full time a little bit before, because the Whitetail business is going like this. The land business is going, or real estate business, appraisal business was going down. So, and then I've been full time in the Whitetail industry for 11 years. So it's been quite a while, and it's been a huge journey with that. And along the way, I did buy my first parcel in 1995, a hunting parcel. And
so when you're still working at the bank,
yes,
right?
Yep, yeah.
How old were you when you bought that?
I was 25.
25 years old.
Yep.
Okay, how big was the parcel?
It was, I think, 36.75 acres.
To be exact. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. How long did you want to walk me through, like, that first piece? Like, how long were you looking? Were you sucking away every penny you could to get, to buy that parcel? Why did you want to buy a piece?
We wanted to buy a piece to actually move to the Thumb area. I'd hunted there since 1987, the Thumb area of Michigan, and it was just a beautiful place to live. In fact, I'd hunted in that section of land for, it would have been 8 years at that point. And so it was a really nice area, knew a lot of people in there, and so it was a nice step to move there. We didn't have a lot of money to put down, and at that time, they were a lot more flexible, especially if you went through a local bank that understood the values in the area. That's changed a lot now. I don't know what we put down, but it wasn't that much, and we were at $11.25 an acre when we bought it, which the farmers in the area, people had been around there for a long time, really scoffed at that amount. But 2 years later or 3 years later, it would have been about 2 years maybe, we moved to the UP in Michigan, and in doing so, it went from $11.25 an acre to $1,500 an acre just in 2 years. So we bought it at a good time, but it was tough. I would say we found more a local bank that helped us than anybody as far as helping us rearrange financing and be able to have a small down payment. And
was that like a single branch bank or not quite?
It was a handful of branches, and that was it. It was a local bank, so that helped greatly.
Yeah, they humanized the process so much more than a major corporation.
Well, they were a lending institution to farmers and local business people, and so they understood the area and they understood the values were going up, and so that helped greatly. That was a different time.
I was 1 year old, so 1995. But I feel that industry and space or segment of real estate, even from 1995 to 2021, would you say has taken kind of a form of itself in terms of just solidifying itself or maturing? Because, I mean, if you think I imagine 1995, there probably wasn't, feels like 100 different land brokerages. There wasn't, specialized land agents. It was, just, I feel like a much more, the market was kind of in infancy.
Oh, certainly. A huge difference. I mean, that was just listed by a local realtor.
Yeah.
They knew nothing about hunting. And that's what, even in the 2000s in the UP, most of the realtors that were selling land were not hunters, even though they were selling hunting land. And that's just changed so much, and so much more specialized now.
So you bought that in 1995, 37.75 acres?
Something like that.
How long did you have that?
36.75. About 2 years.
2 years.
So, and it went up approximately 40% in value, 45% in value during that time.
So a really good return.
About 40%. Yeah.
Yeah, because
very good return.
That's extremely strong. And so the reason you bought that is because you wanted to move, or did you just want your own little
we wanted
room
to move
run?
there and have hunting land, and it was a pretty property right along the Cass River. I'd hunted in that section, like I said, for 7-8 years, and 8 years, I think. So really wanted to be in that location, and we went through house plans, everything, and it was just at a point where we were up there in the UP vacationing in the same spot we had many times, and thought, why don't we just move here?
Wow. Okay, so then you sold it 2 years later, made 40%, and then what? So that puts you at 1997. So when you sold that piece, did you go into something else, or did you just take that money and
we put it into our home up in the UP. So we were able to have a down payment then, put it into there. And along the way, too, we had purchased our first home in 96, 95, right around there. And I had a for sale sign in the front yard in the first month. Redid the hardwood floors, ripped out 5 shades of green shag carpet, painted the garage, cleaned it up, mowed the lawn, trimmed the bushes, and we had to borrow our down payment. I think we had to borrow, it was 5% down payment. It was a $50,000 home, and we put $2,500 down. We sold it for $65,000 in 3 months, and so we put that into our next home, and that was a house of 5 acres. I split off 3 acres as a building lot, and then sold that for, let's say, $15,000, and then we sold the house and 2 acres for $5,000 more than we had paid for the house and 5 acres. To begin with, that all went into the house up north too.
Interesting. So that was probably like when you were 28 then? 27?
27.
27?
27, 28, yep.
Okay, so I'm trying to follow like your journey of life here a little bit.
Yeah.
And then
Well, from there we were able to, we had a lot more down for the house up in the UP, so we had a lot more equity. And so we had to borrow it at first, and then we were able to pay that back and put money more down on our second home, and then we got money from the land sale, so we were able to move up north and then put a decent down payment on our house and 10 acres there. And I immediately contacted the owner of the 120 behind us, because you could tell they hadn't used it. Found where he lived in Lower Michigan and wrote him a letter, and he agreed to sell it to us. So 120,
you said?
Yeah, 120, and that was cheaper acreage up there,
yeah.
Compared to where we came from. I don't even remember. I think it was $750 an acre, and we had sold at $1,500 an acre downstate, something like that. So,
okay.
So that that was part of that. Being able to put that equity into something else. So.
What was the driving factor behind all of this? Because that's a lot of that's a lot of transactions for someone during that time, and to I guess going to 120 acre parcel.
I liked figuring out how to do it, and there really wasn't a lot to read about, for anybody to help you, but And then, again, going back to local banks, we used a bank called People State Bank up in Munising, and they're just a great local lender. It's been owned by the Nebo family for 100 years or whatever it's been, and so even they were creative at financing, and they wanted to help people that were working hard and make money. So and not necessarily make money, but be able to buy land,
make a
figure
smart
out
purchase.
ways to do it.
Yeah. Would you say that's one of the most important things for someone starting out is trying to develop or find a home with a bank or shopping around?
Really, if you're buying acreage, going through a local lender is critical. And that even went forward to when we moved to Coon Valley. I was down here in 2012. I opened an account at a local bank, the River State Bank. And then from there, River State Bank is just, I think they have 5 branches, and we still have bank accounts there today. And it's just, we like the local. I've worked with Park Bank as another small bank around here, credit unions. And so those local lenders are just incredible, and you get to work with people that aren't part of a national organization where you just get lost.
Yeah.
They just know the market. They're more familiar with in-house lending, where they're not going through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. They have their own set of rules. And so it's more of a risk to them, but at the same time, they're educated and experienced about taking that risk.
So if someone was listening to this right now and they're at step 0 right now, would you say that's one of the very first steps?
Yeah, if you're going to be very discouraged if nothing against Wells Fargo or some of those giant banks. I worked at TCF Bank for a long time, Twin Cities Federal. They've been around a long time. They're huge, and they just keep gobbling up other banks. But if you go with those big banks, they have to be very black and white. They can't leave it up to a lender or even a board to make decisions. They're a small group of local people that are on that board making decisions for the welfare of the bank. They have to just have black and white rules.
Strict
that are
underwriting,
followed.
yeah.
And that means they fall within a smaller window of potential of who they're going to lend to. A local lender should be the first person you talk to. And what's nice, so you're going back to the specialized lenders, like we deal with Chad Garteski around here in the area and Weiss Realty. Gordy Weiss started that. He was an incredible person. He unfortunately passed away last fall. He was just wildly successful in western Wisconsin, eastern Minnesota. And they still are the number one, I'm sure by far, real estate agent around here, real estate broker. But if you went and talked to Chad, he'd tell you, go to this person, go to this lender, go to that lender, because they want to make the deal work. And so these good agents are deal makers. And so they're going to tell you, they're going to give you a lot of input, and you should listen to them. What title company, what local attorney. We had our latest land deal just a couple months ago. We bought from a father and son, and that land had been in their family since 1855. They literally bought it from the U.S. government, and I've had a lot of deals in between, but that was we had to sit down. It wasn't listed through an agent, but I still paid Chad a fee to sit down with them and put a purchase agreement together and facilitate the transaction. And I believe if Chad would not have been a part of it, we would not have made the deal work.
Yeah,
but he was a great intermediate.
Which is interesting you bring that up, because a lot of times I think a lot of those deals that don't necessarily hit the market, there's still some sort of professional in there that's facilitating the deal one way or another. And I mean that in the best way possible, too, to make two parties happy.
What's interesting, Chad told me, because we've had a lot of we bought land and sold it in Alma, Wisconsin, Buffalo County, and fixed it up almost like a fixer-upper. And then once we had that deposit and sold that, we were able to step over to our house and land over here. So we bought and sold that through Chad. He sold our house in Coon Valley. We bought this house through Chad. He had sold this land to the owner that built the house here. He'd sold all the land in the area. He hunts near us, really close to us. We even share buck pictures. And so he's more than just an acquaintance, and I trust him. But, again, without him in the process, it would have been, I just don't think it would work. And what's interesting, he told me that a lot of times he doesn't work with individuals on a private land sale because there's so many different complexities that come up. He said, for a small fee meaning compared to what a commission is of a land that you normally get as an agent, it's more headache than it's worth.
Yeah.
And so his cost per time goes way up. So he doesn't make as much money compared to the time on other projects. He agreed to do it for us, and we tried to help him because we've
done a lot of deals with him.
Well, we sat down with the previous owners, and we got to know their cat, their dog. We had beer with them. We looked at the pictures, framed pictures of the original deed from the U.S. government selling it to their family in 1855. I mean, we got to know them quite a bit, and we tried to address all their concerns and do it on a one-on-one basis. And then Chad solidified it, putting it all together for us. So it was a lot of steps, and I felt comfortable talking to him because I'd done a lot of different land deals in the past and was familiar with the process. But boy, without the agent, it would have not worked.
So you think finding a good professional that is an expert in that area is key to making a lot of these deals happen with great efficiency?
I do. And even in the past, I learned a long time ago, I've had advice from different people, but, and this isn't always the way it works because we like working through Chad, but he has most of the listings in the area. So almost everything he looked at, he
already had it listed.
Most of it, yeah. But certainly this place that we bought. But it's always nice because what I found is a lot of good agents want to make the deal work. And so if you list something and I go through you and we're $3,000 or $4,000 apart from the seller, there are ways to be flexible, even to cut a little bit of commission. Say, hey, I had a real estate broker friend of mine, Jerry Lasek, in the past, and Jerry was an awesome man, but he always wanted to be a deal maker.
Yeah.
And so he, for a few $1,000s on a $200,000 purchase, he wasn't going to let that deal go. And so even if he cut his own commission, he was just going to make it work.
Yeah.
And he knew the local bankers, and so some of the best agents, not only do they know the area for hunting, but they're deal makers. So not necessarily the best hunter in the area that just happened to turn to real estate. I know people that have been in that hunting industry, and they're all of a sudden real estate agents because the hunting industry, the TV industry is going down, and all of a sudden they're selling real estate. Well, that doesn't mean they're a deal maker.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. All my deals are like within a 30-minute drive from where I was born and raised.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I don't feel like I can help someone outside of that area because, once again, I know the attorneys, I know the bankers, the local bankers, know the areas, know the property owners.
At least an area 2 hours away, you'd know what to look for. You could ask questions to a local banker. Do you do this? A local title company, a local attorney, something. You would know who to look for.
Yeah.
You know the process. And that's where a deal maker is a deal maker.
Yeah.
Wherever you go. And that's more important than you're a good hunter in the area, you know the land in the area, but that doesn't necessarily make deals.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's where I think agents are fiduciaries for the people that they're helping. Like that's their job, is to help you. It's not to help themselves. And I think sometimes, I think the good agents are always very selfless regardless. But But there's just like any profession, there's good people and there's bad people, and that's just the way. That's just the way that it goes.
Yeah, we've had a lot of steps along the way, good and bad. With real estate, mostly all good. But we, like I said, we went through the housing market crash in the 2000s, and that hurt us a little bit. But there's a lot. We talked about some of the other deals we did along the way. But
So what happened after the 120 acres in Michigan?
We wanted more land in that area. There wasn't a lot of private land. There was federal forest on all sides of us. And so there was public land right next to us, federal land. And I was a real estate appraiser. And I went out to a parcel, and I was appraising a private parcel. And then next door to it, there's a parcel for sale. And it was in a designated federal wilderness area. And it was a 40 acres surrounded by the Fed land. And I just thought right away, I bet you the Feds want this. And so what I did is I went and secured a purchase agreement to buy it right away without even talking to my wife, and went and secured it. And I immediately, I had an out, satisfactory walking to the lines, something gray to where if I didn't like where the lines laid, then we could get out of it. And I called the lands manager for the federal land in the area, and he said, we've been wanting to buy that for 25 years. We made multiple offers. We'll give you any land in the entire country, Alaska included. We'll swap value for value, so you just tell me what you want. And we ended up exchanging that 40 for 50, and that 40 was limited. It had a canyon going through it. And it was a trout stream, but hard to get into, hard to access because you had to walk through federal land to get there.
Yeah.
Where we had land right next door that had veneer timber on it, and good timber value. It was federal land. They don't cut it very often. But we ended up exchanging 40 for 50. The problem was 52. We had to get our congressman involved. It took 5 years. It was, or 4 years, just because it was government. It was extremely slow. And basically, I had the appraiser that had to come out 3 times and keep redoing appraisals because they were outside the 6-month window.
Yeah.
Tell me you're just not the squeakiest wheel. She said you really need to. She even said. And she was a federal lands appraiser. It's a little bit different than what I did with more real estate and small commercial. She told me to call my local congressman, and I'm like, well, I didn't vote for him. And she said, it doesn't really matter. They're supposed to work for you regardless.
Yeah.
I said, okay. Boy, we closed that in like 3 months.
Wow.
Calling the local congressman. So something that was supposed to take 18 months to 2 years took 4.
Well, there's something to be said about that, just being persistent.
Yeah,
let me ask you,
so
how'd you get a purchase agreement after the federal ground or the federal? Were they so they were trying to buy this 40 forever, and then you found it and you were able to get it under contract? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, it was just listed. They didn't realize it was listed through an agent. Yeah, they didn't realize it was listed at that time. They're not scouring, It was in a remote area.
But here they are. They've been bugging them for however long. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That has to be one of the most? Well, I don't know. You've had some other unique deals. Would you say that's one of the most unique ones?
It is. It is. Along the way too, I learned that you can sell land before you own it. And what I mean by that is we had a 20-acre parcel that I thought was grossly undervalued because we thought we could sell 2 10 acres for the same price that the 20 acres was. It was right on a road. It was is what and I see those going. So I just paid full price for it, and then I pushed it out for closing as long as we could. And so I pushed it out for a 90-day closing. And that gave me the time to immediately turn and have those 2 10 acres separated, and then put both those on the market. And actually, when I closed on the 20, the 2 10s had already sold or were closing at the same time. So when I walked out of the closing without ever even really technically just owning it on paper briefly, a second, and walking out with a check, from the 2 10 acres that we sold, and never even really stepped foot on the 20 that we even owned.
Which is pretty amazing. But do you think that by being a real estate appraiser, you're able to have an above average pulse on what the market is doing?
Sure.
And you're pulling comps all the time.
Yeah, you're constantly looking at what market value is, because market value wasn't what one idiot is willing to pay too high for a parcel. It's what the average market that's educated, meaning not school educated, but educated. Typically you go buy a washer and dryer, you're not just walking in saying, here's my card, I want those silver ones. You're actually looking at reviews. You're understanding what the market is, what they should be selling for. And it's no different than land or anything else you purchase. You're not just going into buying a car and have no clue what it is. You just pay it. You're actually a little bit educated about what that car should be selling for, and that's the same with land. That's what the market value is. And so I'd see that all the time. You'd see high sales, low sales, and then you see a whole bunch of sales in the middle that reflect the true market.
Yeah.
And so that gave me a leg up. I had someone up there in the UP that taught me appraisals, that taught me about a lot of creative financing as far as even land contracts. Typically you pay more for a house when it's land contract because you have more favorable financing. You don't have to put as much down. You have to go through a credit check process. So you can expect that, and your interest rate's probably gonna be a little bit higher. Yeah. So, and then learn about splitting land, and then a lot of times if you are in an area and you're buying and selling land a lot, it's really good to get to know one agent or two that they'll bring you deals because they know that you want to buy it and then turn around and fix it up and sell it. Yeah. And so if you're doing that, people are more favorable to bring you a deal when you're just working with them all the time. Yeah. So, and that's even like Chad around here. If I told him, hey, we need something, we want to fix it up and sell it, we have some money to invest, I'm sure he has a lot of other people, but at least it'd be more favorable for us finding a new piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relationship-driven business. I mean,
it is.
That's the fact of it.
Yeah, definitely.
So it sounds like some of the best resources along the way were actually just people and being able to
sure.
the best resource for people bringing you deals talking to other people that are familiar with the market? What are some other resources that were important?
Back then we didn't have online creative ways to buy land, and so now you do. And so how to buy your first hunting parcel. I'm sure if you start Googling, you could find a lot of information to tell you about some of these special ways to buy land.
Yeah.
But in reality, it seems like you have to have more money down now. Your credit has to be extremely high. Of course, your income to debt ratios. It seems like everything has to fall more into a very narrow window for you to be able to buy land. Where in the past, you could be more creative and purchase land without as much money or as much money down, and you just can't do that nowadays. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a rule of thumb. 20% down now,
right? Or higher.
Yeah, with a lot of especially with vacant land or raw land, and that's the thing too. I think it's important to talk to a bank that actually understands hunting. Where I think some banks see it's raw ground, the taxes are $50 a year.
Right.
This can't be worth anything.
Right.
Versus banks that specialize it, or a bank that you have some sort of relationship with too, that you've done other deals with.
Sure.
I think that's super important. What do you think was a common myth or misconception when it comes to, and we'll gauge this more to today. What are some common myths or misconceptions that people might have that aren't very familiar with the actual land buying process, that you think would be like, wow, probably wouldn't know that, but you should?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of that. I know a lot of times people don't realize how much money they have to put down.
Yeah.
And so, or the amount of credit that they have to purchase something. And so your first step in the land buying process is not going online and looking at pieces. It's not going and looking at pieces in person. It's talking to a local lender to see exactly how realistic you are in your purchasing needs and exactly what price range that you could potentially look in and secure a deal.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because in my shoes, you get someone that's excited, they want to go look at a piece, and it's like, well, wait a minute, like, where are you at in this process? Because there's the things that you just talked about, and I cannot imagine what would be more disheartening. And then you go walk it, you fall in love with it, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you can't buy it.
What's frustrating too is, like, if you go to XYZ big bank, then you might get, lender Sally that's been there for a year and a half, and she's just looking to make deals and try to and she doesn't really know a lot, because it takes a lot as a banker to know all the ins and outs. There's a lot of different facets of lending. And I can say I wasn't a lender for that long, and I had a lot to learn when I left the bank and went into appraisals. But we had a situation where someone was going to buy our house in October last year, and they had a letter from a local institution, not a local bank, but a local branch of a big bank, and they had an approval letter, and it was a clean approval letter. It was pretty good. They had about the same offer as everyone else. We had multiple offers right away, but they had a really good approval. Well, 30 days later, they get a rejection letter, and they didn't qualify. And they went to another bank, and the other bank, a local bank, said, with 5 branches or whatever, said you should have never been approved in the first place.
Wow.
And so that was something else. I felt truly bad for the kid. He was 24, 25 years old. He was in the military. He was excited to buy his first home. I guess he had a clean record. He just didn't have enough money down. His debt to income ratios, more just numbers wise, he wasn't a good fit. And anybody could have seen that right off the bat. But we had a letter saying he was. Gosh, I always intended on calling up that bank. I was pretty upset.
Yeah.
Of course, you let it go, and you just don't want the hassle. But I really felt bad for the kid, because he probably told all his friends and family he was buying this.
Yeah.
And he was just excited. And so to see that, because we put it back on the market, and within a week and a half, we had multiple offers. We took the best one, and it ended up closing. But we felt bad for him. And if he would have gone to a local lender, it would have saved us a lot of hassle. Was saved him a lot of hassle. He would have more realistic expectations, as opposed to just XYZ bank that was just trying to turn a number for the month or add it to their stats.
Yeah, and I think one thing too, when you're actually getting pre-qualified, when they pull your credit, you can go get it pulled by a bunch of other banks too, and you can shop around a bit too.
Sure.
Yep. And maybe that would have solved that issue too if he just would have got a few more
right off the bat.
pre-qualifications, and then you go back, well, I didn't get pre-approved from this bank. How come I could get pre-qualified from you? And that would have unfolded that. Well,
oh yeah, right before it started.
Yeah.
So that's your first step, is always a competent local lender.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to vacant land. I mean, you can't go to these big banks. Even if you bank there, so what? You need to go to a local lender and figure it out. And a lot of times, maybe you could call a realtor in the area and say, hey, can you recommend a local lender looking at buying some land? And I don't want to waste your time. I just want to see, and that gets into something too about competition nowadays. And I told you a story recently about a lender or a broker, or a real estate agent that went out to a list, and he was just walking the property and came back to his vehicle, and there are 3 people waiting for him to make an offer on the land that wasn't even listed yet. They literally followed him to the land, were waiting for him, just because the land in the area is that sought after. And so nowadays what I see, and what the lenders will say around here, is a lot of times the local people, farmers, people that are entrenched in this area, they'll take a lot more time to purchase something because they remember the land when it was thousands of dollars less per acre.
Yeah.
$500 per acre. Now it's $4,000, and so they drag their feet. Well, it's not worth that much, and then it sells, and they never have a chance to buy it again. And so you have to make decisions fast, and that doesn't matter if the market's slow or fast. If there's a piece you want, paying an extra 2 or 3% more than you think, or 5%,
and hold on to it, and be happy
you think
with
you're
it.
going to have it for 30 years, this is going to amount to a hill of beans. You're going to look back and say, remember when land was this?
Exactly.
And that's what you paid for it. But
no, that's great advice. Oh, even look at the piece that you're scooping up, or that you just bought.
Yeah.
1855, and you guys are the first person to, like, if
We're
you guys
the second owners.
Yeah, if you would have bought it then, you might not have been able to buy it ever.
Right.
Someone else could have
depending on who
bought
buys it.
someone else could have bought it and held on to it forever, and then you would be like, gosh dang, I wish we just would have done it. It would, make it work.
I'm hoping we can be here for another 30 years, but I'd be 81, and it'll obviously go back on the market at some point sooner than 170 years or 75 years, whatever it was.
So you've gone to how many client trips again?
Roughly? About 1,126 states.
So
1,100 properties.
Yeah,
your clients.
So obviously you're talking to these people. They're paying you to go walk their property and provide results. What are some of the characteristics of these people that you see over time that are especially first generation landowners as well? What does that person look like? It's
interesting. As far as my clients go, the average client amount, I would say over half of them, and I talked to Dylan about this the other day, because Dylan will visit close to 30 clients this year himself, but over half are small business owners and self-employed. And so that puts them in a unique category because they're used to valuing help. When you work for someone else is making all the decisions, but when you have your own business, you have to rely on your attorney, your accountant, and all the people that will help you along the way with whatever facet of business you're in. So there's a lot of people. So it's pretty natural for you to hire a consultant. And so, and I'm trying to think of first-time land buyers. What I see a lot is you see a lot of family where this is dad, chipped in for this, and now the boys can get some land. They're looking at it for grandkids. And so there's a lot of family people that I work with. You're going around with, there was a team that came to our charity event on Sunday, and they were previous clients, but it was a father, son, and grandson. And
That's
so
cool.
I see a lot of those kind of things, either father and kids, and then daughters, whatever, and then also that grandpa, that's in the mix. And so I see a lot of people buying land like that where even grandpa finally passed away, and they'd hunted together for years. It's sad, but oh, by the way, grandpa left you some money. And not only would they have known grandpa would have wanted them to buy some land and enjoy the hunting tradition and keep it going on, but that's what they wanted to do in the first place. So it's kind of, you see them buying land almost with emotion that this is something we want, and make grandpa proud. And so you see a lot of that kind of stuff too. So it's kind of cool to, and then I see a lot of people that have owned the land for years, and there's a diminishing return each year because they keep beating their head against the wall
what's going on?
Doing things that aren't helping them.
Yeah.
And but a lot of people, it's their dream.
Yeah.
To buy land, and so it's really cool to be a part of that and help them out.
Is this the fruition of your dream coming true? Like where we're at right here?
Yeah, I never when we went to buy the land last year, we didn't even look at it at first because it was out of our price range. We didn't realize that he had 160 acres on here that didn't need to go with this. And so when we came into it, we were looking for a house in 40 and ended up buying that on a mortgage, and we bought another couple pieces on land contract, and we didn't even realize that was an option going into it. And so that worked out well just because we could, buy this 40 acres, the home, have that, and then we had the land contract pieces separate. So that was a different option too, that a lot of times, especially in bigger land parcels, then if someone has the means to own that and they're selling it to buy something a lot bigger, in fact, that person had already bought something that was 3 times the size.
Wow.
In the house cabin they had is much bigger, the outbuildings. So they were really stepping up, but they had the resources to buy that without even selling this. And so that made it favorable conditions for land contract.
So when you say land contract, are you saying like a contract for deed type deal?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
How do you structure a lot of those? Is everyone different, I would assume?
I haven't done a lot of them.
Okay.
It's usually, what worked is we were paying this house off, so he was getting a check for 40 acres in the house, a big check, and so this individual kind of looked at it like, that's almost like a down payment for the other 2 pieces. So we put a minimal amount down on the other 2, and then we structured one in terms of when we thought we could pay them off or get to a point where we could secure bank financing easily. And so one we had to pay off in a year, and the other we had 3 years for, is the bigger one.
Interesting.
So we'll actually pay the one off next week, the small one. So,
yeah.
It is exciting. So
Well, you're self-employed too, obviously, which I'm self-employed, so I understand that, and I think sometimes banks and self-employed people more risky.
Well, what's interesting, when we went through even the process of buying the house, we were getting to the end stage, and it's a very frustrating process. And I had been in lending, but when you're self-employed and in COVID times, they made me write a letter explaining why we were still making money.
Isn't that crazy?
Like it's almost like they don't believe you. We had to give them our bank deposits basically up to the Friday before we closed. It was constant, just to show that we weren't having a decline.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when you're self-employed, not always, but in our case, we have different income streams. And so unlike some of my friends that lost their jobs through COVID because they worked for someone and they only had one income stream, basically, we were a lot less risky.
Yeah, maybe one
because
area decreased, but other things increased drastically.
Yeah, and all our areas have been increasing the whole time. So we had to show those numbers. We had to break it down. We had to be patient, and at times I was not patient. It was frustrating. And so I can remember writing that letter of explanation. It took me hours at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Ohio. Just sitting there on a day off, just hammering out this letter that I didn't want to do. It ended up like 2.5 pages. And broke it down, and they said they'd never seen a letter of explanation like that. But I just wanted to be very thorough and break down every single area and all the percentage of increase and why each area had been increasing and why we saw that there was no need for it to decrease, no matter if we had COVID or if there was COVID or not. And so, but that's the bad thing about, again, they have to look at black and white decisions.
Yep.
In our case, we were much less risky than the average person working for someone else because we were self-employed.
Yeah, and multiple streams too. Yeah, of
right.
income.
And that's the thing too. I mean, people need to be realistic. We if you're self-employed, it's great if you get cash, and if someone's getting cash and they're thinking, well, I'll just use this for paying for gas and food and whatever else. But you have to show you make money to actually be able to go into and get a loan. And you could look at some self-employed businesses that are primarily cash. They make a lot of money, but they can't show it, so you're not going to be able to borrow anything.
Yeah.
And that's just a sad truth. So if you want to have dreams of buying land, buying a house, and you're self-employed, you better show it. And then at the same time, you might be closing in we closed June 5th, 2019, and we're doing really well in 2020. But we could only look at our average between 2018 and 2019. So if you're increasing every year and you're doing well in your business, you're looking at a window, and it might even be a 3-year average, but it was far below what we were making at that current level. And so that was a little discouraging too. It's like you can show bank deposits what you're making. You can show these different income streams. And so, again, you better show the money, and you're not going to be able to borrow, and go into it knowing that they might take an average income that's well below what you're currently making.
Yeah, or what you exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to, and I think that's the importance of laying a foundation, maybe because it's a very big decision, and maybe if it takes 2 years to plan and get prepared and be able to be ready to go borrow money,
right?
That's important.
Which is where at least I had a little bit of financial background, so I understood where they're coming from in most cases. But at the same time, it goes back to going to your local financial institution and being very realistic with your search. You're not wasting everyone's time.
Yeah. Well, we have some more things to hash out here today. From the other side of the business, I couldn't agree with that piece of advice more.
Good.
And I think it's key. And we'll end on this. Where does buying land in your most proud moments, most exciting moments, or this is episode 4 here, so I'm working on some of the pillar questions here. But where does land ownership rank in your this? I don't want to say life achievements or
highlights and lowlights.
Yeah, just what is it like? Because for so many people, it's the dream. Like you mentioned, it's multiple generations a lot of times piecing together to make it happen. Because that's
I'll tell you what, it's buying and selling land is pretty black and white to me, but there's times when it's not. And what I mean by that, the first piece was incredible. It was the same section I'd hunted for 8 years. I knew all the neighbors. I loved the area. And to be honest, I've driven. I worked for the neighbor across the street twice. He's been a client twice, and so that's the only time I've actually driven by there, because we planted 9,000 trees on that property. You get to know the land, love the area, and I just didn't even want to drive back by to look at the property. It was that emotional of this is the best thing to do going forward, but it was really hard. And so what I'm finding out here, I've had leased land. The piece in Wisconsin we had one for 12 years, and then we've had one, this will be the 7th or 8th hunting season coming up on that one. And you have a connection with the land, but you're leasing it. And so you never walk on it with the thought that I can do these things long term, and it's mine for this short period of time, because we have it for 30 years. Let's face it, it's short. And so I guess when you're looking at the land and you look at it as this is a long-term, I don't think the deer hunting's long-term. That's different. I think you should be able to have quality results within 1 year. The first year you should be able to make big differences. But I love that connection of land. And so it's being able to drive on the property, just go for a slow cruise, show the land to people. And you start to look at the trees a lot different. You like that big oak tree in that spot. This is a cool feature of the land. Big difference from leasing. And I think that emotional tie to the land and being connected to the land is something that some people can't ever really experience until they actually own land for themselves, work on it. Because I bought and sold land just to sell it, and I didn't really care. It's just a numbers thing. Even the piece in Alma, we hunted it. My son Sam shot a really beautiful 10-point on it with a crossbow, but we bought that to sell it. And so even though we saw big buck pictures, I'd get excited, but then always in the back of my head, we're selling it. And so, but when you finally buy a piece that you want to hold for a while, it's special.
I'm sure.
And that's what I love, about buying land. That's the most is getting to know the land. And that's something, again, I think that's one of the most special things about owning land along the way.
Perfect. We'll close out with that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We'll link to You as always,
Sure.
and always appreciate your time. You're very generous. I know you have a lot of things going on, and you've taken the time to record with us for a lot, and we really, really appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, it was great. I always enjoy recording with you guys.
Cool. Thanks.